If you're still waiting for the right time, the right mood, or the right circumstances, this is your wake-up call. Nothing meaningful in your life will change until you stop explaining why you can't and start confronting why you haven't. Growth does not begin with comfort. It begins when excuses end. And heading into 2026, you have a choice. Repeat another year of explanations, or take responsibility for the life you're building. Responsibility is non-negotiable because without it, nothing in your life is truly yours to change. The moment you shift blame outward towards circumstances, timing, other people, or past mistakes, you give up control over your future. Responsibility is not a punishment or a moral burden. It is a position of authority. It means recognizing that while you may not have chosen every situation you're in, you are always choosing how you respond, how you prepare, and how consistently you act. When responsibility is avoided, life feels chaotic and unfair. When responsibility is accepted, life becomes structured, predictable, and workable, even under pressure. Many people misunderstand responsibility as harsh self-criticism, but in reality, it is the opposite. Responsibility replaces emotional reactions with practical decisions. It removes the need to justify inaction because it demands movement instead of explanation. Every excuse, no matter how reasonable it sounds, delays progress by shifting focus away from what can be done right now. Responsibility asks a harder question. Given the reality in front of you, what action are you willing to take today that moves things forward, even slightly? That question cannot be answered with complaints or comparisons, only with effort. Responsibility also forces clarity. It exposes the gap between intention and behavior, between what you say you value and how you actually live. When you stop blaming external factors, patterns become visible. Missed workouts are no longer about lack of time, but about priorities. Inconsistent work is no longer about motivation, but about discipline. Emotional instability is no longer about stress, but about unmanaged habits. Responsibility does not judge these patterns, but it does not allow them to be ignored. It insists that results are produced by repeated choices, not by hope or potential. This is why responsibility feels uncomfortable at first. It removes the illusion that growth will arrive through luck, validation, or sudden inspiration. It places the weight of change exactly where it belongs, on daily behavior. Responsibility demands consistency when progress is slow, restraint when shortcuts are tempting, and honesty when self-deception feels easier. Once accepted, responsibility becomes stabilizing. It simplifies decisions, reduces anxiety, and replaces confusion with direction. You no longer wait for permission to improve because you understand that your life moves only when you move. Discipline beats motivation because motivation is unreliable by nature. It rises and falls based on mood, environment, and temporary emotion, while discipline operates independently of how you feel. If your progress depends on motivation, your effort will always be inconsistent because feelings are inconsistent. Discipline removes emotion from the decision-making process and replaces it with structure. You act because the action is required, not because you feel inspired to do it. This is what turns improvement into a system rather than a struggle, and it is the only way to sustain effort over long periods of time. Motivation often creates the illusion of readiness. It convinces people that once they feel confident, energized, or inspired enough, then action will follow. In reality, action is what creates momentum, not emotion. Discipline understands this and works in the opposite direction. It starts with movement, even when resistance is high and enthusiasm is low. Showing up tired, bored, or uncertain builds a form of strength that motivation cannot provide. Over time, disciplined action trains the mind to cooperate instead of negotiate, reducing internal resistance and mental friction. Discipline also protects progress during difficult periods. When life becomes demanding, stressful, or unpredictable, motivation disappears first. Discipline remains because it is anchored in habits and non-negotiable standards rather than feelings. It creates default behaviors that carry you forward when attention is scattered and energy is limited. This is why disciplined individuals do not rely on willpower every day. They rely on routines that make the right actions easier to repeat. Structure becomes a form of support, not restriction. Without discipline, goals remain abstract ideas. With discipline, they become daily practices. Discipline turns long-term ambitions into short-term commitments that can be executed regardless of circumstances. It forces honesty about what you are willing to do consistently, rather than what you hope to achieve eventually. Progress is no longer measured by how motivated you feel, but by how reliably you act. Over time, discipline builds trust with yourself because you learn that you will follow through even when it is uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unrewarding. Resilience is built under pressure because comfort does not require adaptation, but difficulty does. When conditions are easy, there is no demand to change how you think, act, or respond. Pressure exposes weaknesses that would otherwise remain hidden, forcing you to confront limits in your discipline, patience, and emotional control. This exposure is not a sign of failure, it is information. It shows you where structure is missing and where consistency has not yet been developed. Without pressure, growth remains theoretical because there is no reason to strengthen what is not being tested. Most people try to avoid pressure, believing it is something that breaks them rather than builds them. In reality, what breaks people is the absence of preparation. Pressure reveals how well your habits support you when motivation is gone and circumstances are not favorable. It shows whether your routines are stable enough to hold under stress or whether they collapse the moment conditions change. Resilience is not an emotional trait. It is a functional outcome of repeated exposure to difficulty combined with continued effort. Each time you remain consistent through resistance, you increase your capacity to endure future challenges with less disruption. Setbacks are an essential part of this process. They interrupt momentum and challenge identity, which is why they feel so destabilizing. But resilience is not developed by avoiding setbacks. It is developed by responding to them without abandoning your standards. The decision to continue after disappointment, to adjust without quitting, and to stay engaged without drama strengthens internal stability. Over time, setbacks lose their power to derail you because you have proven to yourself that disruption does not equal collapse. Pressure also sharpens focus. When resources such as time, energy, or certainty are limited, unnecessary behaviors fall away. You are forced to prioritize what actually matters, which brings clarity to your actions. This clarity reduces overthinking and replaces it with execution. Resilient individuals are not immune to stress. They are practiced in functioning within it. Their confidence comes not from belief, but from experience earned by staying present and disciplined when conditions were uncomfortable, uncertain, and demanding. Self-control is a daily practice because it is not established through intention alone, but through repeated behavior under ordinary conditions. It is shaped in moments that feel insignificant, when no one is watching and no immediate consequences visible. Every choice to delay gratification, to resist distraction, or to maintain standards reinforces mental and physical restraint. These decisions accumulate quietly, forming patterns that determine how you respond under pressure. Without daily practice, self-control weakens because the mind defaults to comfort when it is not trained to do otherwise. Most lapses in self-control do not come from major failures, but from small allowances made repeatedly. Skipped routines, impulsive consumption, and unmanaged attention slowly erode discipline. Over time, these patterns lower tolerance for discomfort and increase dependence on convenience. Self-control requires awareness of these tendencies, not as moral judgments, but as operational risks. When boundaries are not defined and enforced, behavior becomes reactive rather than intentional. Daily structure creates friction against impulsive choices, making restraint easier to maintain than excess. Physical and mental self-control are deeply connected. The way you manage sleep, nutrition, movement, and stimulation directly affects cognitive clarity and emotional regulation. When the body is neglected, the mind becomes less stable, more reactive, and more susceptible to distraction. Likewise, unmanaged thoughts and habits weaken physical discipline by increasing avoidance and inconsistency. Practicing self-control in one area strengthens it in others because restraint functions as a transferable skill rather than a fixed trait. Self-control also requires honesty about triggers. Fatigue, stress, boredom, and unstructured time are predictable conditions that lower restraint. Ignoring them leads to repeated lapses that feel unexplainable but are entirely preventable. Daily practice means anticipating these moments and preparing systems that reduce reliance on willpower. Clear routines, limited exposure to distractions, and intentional recovery all serve to protect decision-making capacity. Over time, self-control stops feeling like constant resistance and begins to feel like alignment between intention and action, built through consistent, deliberate effort applied every day. Consistency outperforms intensity because progress is created through repetition, not through occasional bursts of effort. Intensity feels productive because it is dramatic and exhausting, but it is also difficult to sustain. When effort is fueled by urgency or emotion, it tends to collapse once energy drops or circumstances shift. Consistency, by contrast, operates at a level that can be maintained across changing conditions. It prioritizes reliability over excitement and process over performance, which is why it produces results that last rather than progress that fades. Intense effort often creates unrealistic expectations about speed and outcome. When results do not appear quickly, motivation declines and commitment weakens. This cycle leads to repeated restarts instead of steady advancement. Consistency avoids this trap by narrowing focus to what can be executed daily without negotiation. Small actions, repeated over long periods, compound into outcomes that intensity alone cannot achieve. The power of consistency lies in its ability to remove drama from progress and replace it with routine. Consistency also builds trust with yourself. Each time you follow through on a manageable commitment, you reinforce the belief that your actions are dependable. This self-trust reduces internal resistance and makes it easier to continue showing up even when conditions are imperfect. Intensity demands optimal circumstances and high energy, while consistency functions under fatigue, stress, and uncertainty. Over time, consistent behavior becomes automatic, reducing the cognitive effort required to maintain progress. Sustainable growth depends on systems, not motivation. Consistency is the operational expression of those systems. It transforms long-term goals into daily behaviors that are repeatable and measurable. By lowering the barrier to action, consistency ensures that progress continues even when enthusiasm fades. It also creates space for adjustment without abandonment, allowing effort to evolve without interruption. The individuals who improve the most over time are not the ones who work the hardest in short bursts, but the ones who refuse to stop showing up regardless of how ordinary the effort feels. Growth is not waiting for you in some future version of yourself. It is built by what you repeat when no one is paying attention. Excuses will always offer comfort, but they never offer direction. Responsibility, discipline, resilience, self-control, and consistency are not ideas to admire. They are standards to live by. If you want 2026 to look different, your daily behavior has to be different starting now. The work is simple, but it is not easy. Show up. Do the necessary things even when they feel ordinary. Drop the explanations and commit to execution. Growth begins exactly where excuses end, and the moment you choose responsibility over comfort, your life starts moving forward on your terms.